How are you now? I'm occasional talking head for smallcaps.com.au, James Whelan, and we're here on this special occasion. I am actually technically away from my usual place of business at the in Small Caps HQ down here on holiday, but very special presentation. I've got a special shirt which I keep just for these occasions here. I bought it at one of the local op shops for about $4.50, helping out the Uniting Church, I think, on this one. But anyway, look, enough of that nonsense. Today I am joined by old friend, someone I'm very proud to call a friend and a colleague in this industry of ours, Dr. Mike Jones, Managing Director of Impact Minerals, ASX code IPT. Impact Minerals, here we go. Impact Minerals is an Australian exploration and development company focused on critical minerals with its flagship Lake Hope high-purity alumina. I've known this for years. I don't understand why I'm reading it. This HPA is the HPA project in WA. The company is advancing a patented low-cost, low-carbon process to produce high-purity alumina, HPA, we're going to say that a few times, a material essential for batteries, LEDs, and other high-tech applications. Impact is also exploring opportunities in potash, we'll get to that in a second, and other valuable byproducts that could significantly enhance project economics. Dr. Mike Jones, thank you for having me. Well, thank you for being on the show. Was that explanation okay with you?
Yeah, thanks, James. And yes, it was pretty good for this time of the year. And good to be back with you in a very different environment to the last ones. This is all on the up from here.
Yeah. Now this shirt, I know I probably should have ironed it, but we don't worry about that. Things have to push on ahead, mate. It's no cause on formalities for this sort of thing. So look, so run us through HPA, the Lake Hope project process, I should say. Do you want to summarise the key technical breakthroughs achieved under the CRCP program so far?
That's right. Well, that was the outcomes of the announcement that we put out on Friday of last week, which is the first sort of major update on that particular research program, which is funded by the federal government under their CRCP joint research initiatives. So that's a three-way research program between ourselves, Edith Cowan University, in particular their Mineral Resource Recovery Centre, which specialises in membrane technology, which we'll talk about, and also CPC Engineering. Very much involved with impacts. They did all the engineering studies for our pre-feasibility study on Lake Hope, which was completed in the middle of last year. And that had some pretty robust numbers, which we're now building on. Just a quick summary on that. The net present value is about $1.2 billion Australian post-tax. It has a capital expenditure, including contingencies, of about 250 million Australian dollars, and a great internal rate of return. I think it was well over 40%, and very strong cash flows. And that's because the high purity market, alumina market, is expanding. It's one with potentially high margins and certainly in high demand. Those things that you mentioned, batteries, LEDs, and in particular things like the semiconductor industry and industrial ceramics, they're all growing on average at about 20% plus per annum, and HPA is a critical part of all of that. So look, it's a great project, and we're well on our way to getting involved in that over the next couple of years.
Well, I just wanted to go through, and for anyone who's watching and listening, Mike and I have travelled far and wide across this country with this story. I'm a huge fan of this story, and it's really good to have you on board here. If we're just going to take a step back and talk about what it actually is, out at Lake Hope in WA, it's effectively, are we calling it a sludge, a mud, or is it? I like the word sludge, but it's
run
us through.
Yeah, sure. Look, one of the secrets to the successful financial and big financial numbers that sit around this project is that the material that we're going to mine and convert into the high purity alumina is in the top 2 meters of a salt lake, 500 kilometers east of here from Perth. And we've spoken at length a number of times that on site, this material is basically direct shipping ore. So our plan is very simple. We're going to dig up the top meter or two and we're going to truck it to Perth. So there's no beneficiation. There's no requirement for power, no requirement for water. So we're going to have a very low footprint mining operation there. And when you consider that the top 2 meters does contain something in the order of 10 billion US dollars worth of HPA, which we can now say because we have a reserve on the back of the pre-feasibility study. We can see it's quite a remarkable project. And we'll say the mining is the easy bit. It's the processing then that becomes the trick at the other end. And that's what this work is that we're doing with the CRCP and with Edith Cowan University in particular. So
Yes.
in essence, that's it. Dig it up out of the salt lake, truck it into Perth, and then convert it into HPA.
Outstanding. Very good work with the segue too. You're taking my job here. So let's get to the membrane technology that you did mention previously. How significant is its role in reducing costs and environmental impact for the lake coat process?
So membranes well known and have been used extensively in the water treatment industry for decades. And things like filtration at different membrane sizes, micro, ultra, and nano filtration, super fine filtration to remove particles. And also the next step from that is reverse osmosis. And that's been used, as I say, for decades in the water treatment industry to produce pure water. And it is a bit limited in what it can do, but over the last probably 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of research. And Eton University now, under Professor Amit Razanjou, they're bringing that technology into the mining industry and starting to see some very significant benefits from that. They've already got some patents out for direct lithium extraction and also rubidium. We will have some, breakthrough stuff for ourselves for the production of the high purity alumina. And they do a couple of things. So you can filter the material, and that's a very important part of our process now, to produce clean brines to allow us to crystallize clean products. And then it can also be used to clean up a lot of the wastewater, allowing us to reduce the water budget and also the operating costs by being able to recycle our water as we move forward. I've been quite blown away by, how much the membrane technology can potentially offer us.
Okay. Well, that's all right. Now let's talk about more opportunities. Now, I know that you're a great guy, but you're going to be assisting in feeding the world potentially with some of the, I'll let you explain it. The potash opportunity, which is there, how big could the standalone potash be, the opportunity be, and with regards to, well, there you go. How does the potash opportunity complement what you're doing with the HPA? How about I just make it easy?
That was good. That was a nice summary there at the end. So look, the way that we make HPA is a very simple, straightforward process. It's 3 stages. The first stage is we take that ore that I mentioned, we dig it up, truck it into Perth, and then we leach it in an alkaline material. And we get 2 products from that. One is a liquid byproduct, and the other is a solid residue. The solid residue is what then goes into stage 2. We leach that with hydrochloric acid. And then stage 3 is we stick that in the kiln to turn it into high purity alumina. Okay, so that's our process. But the liquid that we get from stage 1 is very rich in potash, sulfate of potash in particular. And so we are able to crystallize that potash, and it provides a very valuable byproduct credit per ton of HPA production. So the key figure I left out in the review of the PFS was that the operating cost for us to produce a ton of HPA is going to be down in the sort of maybe around about the $5,000 per ton area, and it's currently selling for $22,000 to $25,000 a ton minimum. So you can see the margins that are in there. However, we can offset when we bring in the potash byproduct credit, we believe that we can drop that operating cost by about 25%, so down to sort of maybe $4,500 per ton. It's very significant. Now, that process of producing potash is not economic in its own right. We couldn't just sort of stop there and start producing potash, right?
Yeah.
From that process, it's still cash negative. However, during all of our research, we did discover another method to make potash as the primary product. We basically dig up that ore, add different chemicals to it, heat it up, and we get potash, and we also get a valuable acid byproduct there. Now, in order for us to make that work, we need to probably the mining operation would need to be, 4 or 5 times bigger than the one planned for HPA. But we believe that we can produce in a project parallel to the HPA, something in the order of maybe 100,000 tons per annum or more of potash. Australia imports all of its potash, and so there's a ready market for it right here in Western Australia. So we're very excited by this opportunity. Very early days, lots of work to be done, but that's where we're at.
But 25% cost offset that's a realistic number.
We haven't actually done enough test work to incorporate those numbers in the official economic model for the pre-feasibility study. But that now, with all the work we're doing with the membranes, etc., means that we'll be able to feed that into that module as we go forward.
Okay. Well, look, we saw the popularity of subject change. We saw the popularity of ESG rise, and not necessarily fall, but somehow dissipate. But it is still very important for projects to make sure that they don't leave a huge footprint. How important are sustainability aspects like water recovery for attracting new investors or different investors and customers, but also how important are they for yourself and impact?
They are still very important, as said James. So if you speak to potential investors from institutional investors, ESG is still very high, if not probably number 2 on their list of priorities. So it still has to be considered, despite the perhaps apparent it's not as important as in people's faces in the industry now, but it's still underneath that, still hugely important. And also, you need to do the right thing by people, and you need the social license to operate, and all of those things. So look, in our case, membrane technology added to the mining. So on the mining, we're only going to leave behind a hole in the ground that's probably 1 to 2 meters deep, and that will fill in naturally. In fact, the deposit is probably still forming today as we speak. With the process, we believe that that membrane technology is going to allow us to really revolutionize the flow sheet and drop costs even further. In general, we have a very low carbon footprint for the entire process. And then lastly, on very good terms with the Naju community. So the Naju are the native title group. We've already completed a heritage survey over the lake surface, and there were no impediments to mining. And so we'll enter negotiations with them later this year to look towards mining on the lake surface in the next couple of years. So look, it's very high on the list of priorities, and we're doing all the right things to make sure that it remains that way.
Okay, well, that is good to know, and the local connections there as well. So it can be hard to it's easy to stuff it up, but it's great that you guys are getting it right, which is good out there too. So now the integration with HyPura, how is the integration work with Aluminous processing? What synergies do you see?
Yeah, so this is perhaps want to make sure that the story is relatively clear. So we have Impact has its Lake Hope project and its own process. And then at Easter time last year, we were able to purchase out of administration with other investors a 50% share in the HyPura technology, which is a very elegant back end to producing high purity alumina. Now, the feedstock for the HyPura process is aluminium sulfate. It's a water treatment product off the shelf in Bunnings. It makes a very clean feedstock into that HyPura process. Of note is that in the lake at Lake Hope, it is aluminium sulfates that we have there. And so there's a natural affinity that we should be able to put Lake Hope into the HyPura process and work out if it's cheaper and more efficient. The biggest thing, regardless of that, and people shouldn't get too bogged down about feedstocks and processes. We believe that the Aluminous pilot plant is accelerating our entry into the HPA marketplace by several years and probably $6 to $10 million in saved overheads and costs. That's what people should be focused on.
Yeah.
And Aluminous has already announced it's got a collaboration with C4V, which is a well-known battery technology company in North America. And that collaboration will allow us to go through a lot of the test work required for the battery market upfront in advance of us really engaging with battery manufacturers. So we can go to them saying, hey, we've already passed most of your tests. This is what our product is. So we did a lot of that work in-house ourselves before having to knock on the doors of the customers. So that's really what that's about. At some point, so we are working with Edith County University to see whether we can take our feedstock and use that as a precursor for the HyPura process. But let's not lose the fact that the pilot plant down there is going very well and should accelerate our entry into the marketplace.
Excellent. And I do remember when that leapfrog happened, and taking you way ahead of what the original schedule was, which is great for investors too. Now, let's go into you mentioned the pilot plant. So what's the timeline with the pilot plant at the moment, moving from bench scale to pilot scale? What does success look like in that regard?
Yeah. So we'll stick with Aluminous because that's where the pilot plant is. So just before Christmas, we did solve the last technical issue that was causing a bit of a hold up in terms of getting the whole circuit to run. So we're very happy with the results of that, and we'll have some news on that very shortly. I've said publicly that we believe that we can increase the amount that we produce from that facility, quite considerably, and that certainly seems to have been supported by the work that's been done so far. So that's a huge step forward in terms of the cost for us to scale up to, say, 100 plus tons per annum of HPA production, more than enough to hand out to clients in a very short period of time at a relatively very low cost. So that pilot plant will be put into continuous mode operation in this quarter. We're now in a position to be able to provide materials to clients and including C4V as part of that research. And I'm pretty sure that Aluminous is going to have a massive year this year. We're looking in terms of us, to cut to the chase, we're looking to be able to still produce potash from our stage 1. And then we're taking the residue from that and seeing if we can use that as the feedstock for HyPura. If that was to work, our cost of production would be way, way down. So, potentially very exciting benefits there from integrating the two processes.
And you do mention cost of production. I do love the standard catchphrase that there is about Impact Minerals, but I'll let you get to it. So let's talk about market positioning now. How you see Impact competing in the HPA market in terms of cost, sustainability, and scalability. It's your chance to sing that song.
I think that this is the year now with the pilot plant that we can now engage with customers. Often quoted in my talks, I talk about there are 5 barriers you need to get over to get into the HPA business, whether it's high purity silica, high purity manganese, high purity quartz, or high purity alumina. You need the right process, you need your own laboratory, you need to be able to recycle your reagents. The 4th one is really clients won't take you seriously until you've got a pilot plant. All right. And is the critical thing now that we're in a position this year to be able to do. So I see a lot of client engagement coming in this current 12 months. And that will set us up for the last barrier, which is funding the next stage of scale up. And the thing that will drive the interest is that I believe that overall we're going to be one of, if not the lowest cost producers of HPA globally. And that will be, our entry into the marketplace. And it's going to be we're going to be working on scoping studies and feasibility studies on the pilot plant and looking at getting a much better handle then on what the operating costs will be, going forward. So that's how our positioning will be. And we're very excited about what this next 12 months is going to hold for us.
As am I. So let's talk about the funding and partnerships that there are. What will these advances that you've had in that regard change your funding requirements? You got to ask this question, or attract new strategic partners?
Yeah, look, always on the lookout for strategic partners. I think now once we've demonstrated that we've got over the technical hurdles for the HyPura process and we've got consistent production, we will start to see, increasing interest. We haven't marketed it hard as yet, but I think the new breakthrough that Impact's got with the potash, if we tell, CSBP or Wesfarmers that, we've got a method of making very good quality potash. We've got avenues there to go and speak to existing fertilizer makers and distributors. Those will be high on our list of things to do, going forward. So there's always capital to be raised. I always like to point out, look, the $10 billion worth of HPA that I mentioned at Lake Hope, we drilled out for 250,000 Australian dollars, which is a ridiculous return on a drilling investment. If we had a similar value, NPV value over $1 billion in a gold project, we would have spent probably $100 million on drilling. We're probably going to get to FID on a larger plant for less than 10 million. Overall. So the amount of dilution that is going to be required to get there is minuscule compared to, had we found, a giant gold deposit or something like that. And that's one of the other unique things about this HPA project.
Excellent. Well, any other big milestones that you've got for 2026? Let's mark them out now that it's early in the year and see how we go for the next 12.
That's right. Look, we are still working on our Broken Hill project, and we'll have a lot of news on that in the next month or so. We've got some very exciting geophysics. Whether we drill some of those targets ourselves or look for a partner remains to be seen, but there's some very enticing targets coming out of that. And then as part of this increasing focus on HPA, last year we did a couple of deals. We dropped a lot of ground as well. So one of the deals we did last year is on our Lachlan Fold Belt Copper Gold project, the Commonwealth project. That's now with Conoco. They're earning a 70% interest. We are 30% free carried interest in Decision to Mine. They will start their first drill program probably towards the end of January. Some spectacular gold and silver grades there, which of course right now is all the favour, all the rage, and so hopefully we'll see some good results from standard exploration as well.
Okay, well that's great, Mike. Thank you so much for the insights and for joining us today. I've got the shirt. I might have to give it an iron. I'm actually wearing my swimmers on underneath this one, just at the bottom half. No, you don't need to know that.
There's almost too much information, James.
That's how I think we've known each other for a bit too long. I started to get a bit of, but look, it sounds like 2026 is going to be a transformative year for Impact. I've been following it for so long. Really keen on this next stage. This is the year. and we're going to see what happens with Lake Hope and the HyPura tech integration, paving the way for a vertically integrated HPA business. We at smallcaps.com.au will be watching closely for these milestones, and thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, James.